Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Amy Sam. I am the Health Education Project Specialist with the Maxwell and Eleanor Blum Patient and Family Learning Center at Mass General Hospital. Today's program is a special collaboration between the Blum Center and Mass General Hospital for Children, part of the MGHfC parenting series. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few items with you all. Please note that today's session is being recorded for educational purposes. If you'd like to view the recording, you may visit the Blum Center website at massgeneral.org/Blum-Center. Please note everyone is in listen-only mode. Everyone has been muted so that we can hear our guest speakers today. If you have a question you'd like to ask the guest speakers, feel free to use the chat feature, which is located at the bottom of your screen. We'll have time for them in the end. Only Blum Center staff, co-host, and guest speakers will see your questions. Please do not share any personal medical information or questions in the chat box. If you have a personal medical question, please ask your doctor. So next, I would like to hand it over to Brianna Beckfold, Mass General Hospital for Children's Project Manager and Editor, and she will introduce you all to today's guest speakers.
Thank you, Amy. So good afternoon. I hope you're all doing well, and thanks for coming to this virtual session of the MGHfC Parenting Series, where experts share their knowledge with patients, family, and staff on various pediatric health topics. This year, we're co-hosting the series with the Blum Patient and Family Learning Center at Mass General. And like Amy said, my name is Brianna Beckfold, and I'm a project manager and editor at Mass General Hospital for Children, which is the pediatric branch of Mass General. And today we have three guest speakers. We have Meaghan Alexander, Kelly Millan, and Simona Lourekas. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce each of them. Meaghan Alexander is a clinical nutrition specialist and registered dietitian who specializes in pediatric nutrition and growth management in at-risk infants. She currently cares for children and their families through pediatric gastroenterology and nutrition, the Food Allergy Center, and the Center for Feeding and Nutrition here at MGHfC. She earned a master's degree in food and nutrition from Framingham State University. We also have Kelly Millan, who's a clinical pediatric dietitian and registered dietitian in pediatric gastroenterology and nutrition, who specializes in infant, toddler, and children's nutrition. She earned her master's degree in nutrition sciences and completed her dietetic internship at Simmons University. And we have Simona Lourekas, who is also a clinical pediatric dietitian, a registered dietitian, and certified health education specialist in pediatric gastroenterology and nutrition. She cares for children with food allergies, general gastroenterology and nutrition needs, and food allergies. She completed her master's degree in nutrition sciences from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst and her dietetic internship at Brigham and Women's Hospital. As Meaghan and Kelly and Simona present, we'll take questions from the audience in the chat box. And from here, I'll hand it over to our speakers. Okay.
Great. Yeah, so nice to meet everyone. As they introduced, I'm Simona Lourekas, and I will be, presenting initially, and then we'll hear from my colleagues, Kelly and Meaghan. So nice to meet everyone. We're going to be sort of talking about learning to set the stage for healthy habits and helping to kind of work with picky eaters. So we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so, as an introduction as to some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, as pediatric dietitians, we know how challenging feeding and nutrition can be, and that, parents may face many issues when it comes to, trying to raise a healthy eater. And not only are we thinking about a child who has an independent mind and will, but there's lots of outside influences that can impact a child's eating habits. So we'll be discussing today, helping to discern which nutrition information around us is truthful and which might not be truthful, the variety of convenience food options and, marketing that will be around us, but ways to still, find some healthy choices. And, while we know that this is not all within just the parents' control, just like we can't control what exactly, goes into the child's mouth, we, the same way that we can't necessarily control all of their behaviors and life choices and, schoolwork, but still sort of figuring out, what things we can sort of control or make changes. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so, getting into a little bit more about, what to, feed our children. So, many of us have seen this, the MyPlate guidelines. Their website also has some lovely resources, coloring books, and different things to sort of use to sort of discuss healthy choices with your kids. But the main overall goal, in addition to fitting in those different food groups, is just increasing, our intake of just whole foods. So by doing that, we're also kind of decreasing our intake of more processed foods that might be higher in sugar, sodium, processed oils, food additives, and they might be also lower in fiber and some other, vitamins and minerals. And there's, more research showing that having a more whole foods diet can help with, keeping a healthier weight, lower risk of some chronic diseases, compared to those who are kind of restricting specific food groups, like restricting fat or restricting carbohydrates, or trying to restrict certain amounts of calories. So the research is really helpful on wanting to sort of promote, a more whole foods based diet. We'll kind of discuss today, while there might be some marketing that discusses, while manufacturers will try to mention the benefits of their foods, we'll be discussing, examples of how the whole foods are often still the better option. And, some examples above of things that fit into each of the food groups. We have some examples of some of the lean protein group, and that, provides protein, iron, zinc, omega-3s, vitamin D. The whole grain group provides our necessary carbohydrates, fiber, some vitamins and minerals as well. Fruits and vegetables also provide lots of fiber, phytonutrients, vitamins and minerals. The dairy group, as many of us has heard, calcium, vitamin D, protein, fat sources for younger children, and then the healthy fats that can really help us, absorb all the fat soluble vitamins that can, be along with the other foods that we eat with those healthy fats. Yeah, so you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so, just a picture of what could be, potentially a child's plate, and, kind of thinking about having, reasonable expectations about what a child may eat, even with, a lovely plate like this, where there's, something from each food group, a nice variety of colors, which sort of shows us that there's, the different, having a rainbow on our plate shows us that there's different types of vitamins and minerals throughout the plate. But we wouldn't expect the child to necessarily finish everything on the plate. So allowing the child to do some of that self-regulating about their hunger and fullness cues, and exploring, different food options. And then we do expect, portions to change depending on age, how a child is growing, what foods they prefer, and even just meal to meal or day to day, we'll see some fluctuation. Sometimes I even have parents kind of in my office sort of compare, the size of maybe their fist or their hand to the child, and sort of show that, while we traditionally might say, having, pasta or something the size of your fist, meat maybe the size of your palm, if you sort of compare while it's not a perfect way of doing it, comparing different members of the families, you might see that, we would expect different portions for people of, different ages and different sizes. Yeah. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so these are some, pitfalls that we'll be discussing. We'll be kind of going over food and beverage marketing, the picky eater, and the junk food lover. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll get started talking on, the first pitfall here, and then we'll hear from my colleagues, Kelly and Meaghan, on some solutions, and as well as discussing some of the other pitfalls. So, a major one is food marketing towards children. So 1.8 billion per year is spent on marketing towards children and teens back in 2009. So number may be even higher now. And of that, the majority is from fast foods, carbonated beverages, and breakfast cereals. And there's also, in addition, there's marketing towards parents as well, with health claims and on even products that are, not high in nutrition, to try to sort of appeal to the buyers and the family. And they tend to use, like the picture shown, colorful, fun characters, television characters kids may be familiar with, show other kids having a good time enjoying that food. But research shows us that up until about the age of 8, children aren't really able to understand that the marketing is biased. So, what they see is what they're going to believe. And, there's, I'm sure you can kind of see all kinds of things online as well, too. There's, information about food scientists who sort of work on, formulations of foods to make them, so that you crave them and have trouble sort of putting them down. There's information about how some breakfast cereals, they have the character's eyes looking down so that the child kind of makes eye contact with them when they're in the store. So it's kind of looking down at a lower height. There's all kinds of things out there if you look into it. Yeah, and then I'll switch it over to Kelly next.
All right, so I'll start going into some of the solutions to pitfall number 1, food marketing. One of the first things that you can try to do to limit exposure to food marketing is to limit screen time. We know that it's nearly impossible to eliminate that kind of exposure altogether. However, this is one of the biggest ways that we can make that kind of impact. So limiting the number of commercials that they see, as well as the number of product placements that might be occurring in TV or movies. And we know that marketing doesn't just occur on screens, it also happens on food product labels. Like Simona was saying, there's the characters showing up on boxes or on billboards. So types of things that are really hard to avoid if your child is going with you to the grocery store, if they're just in the car and looking out the window and seeing an advertisement. So you can only change things that you have control over. And that's why limiting screen time ends up being such a valuable tool for this pitfall. You can also do a lot of learning at home. So parent modeling or having other people in the household, like older siblings or extended family members, showing the younger kids what healthy eating behaviors look like, what foods that you want them to be eating, appropriate portion sizes, how to enjoy meals, and really just getting on a schedule for eating. You can also use this time to show younger kids your own family values about nutrition and food. Food is so tied up with who we are and our cultural beliefs. So mealtimes can be a really good time to talk about these things and make eating an enjoyable experience. Additionally, you can discuss food marketing and advertising as a family if it feels age appropriate. So, as Simona mentioned, that the research shows that kids up until about 8 aren't really able to understand that they're being influenced by marketing. So maybe kiddos that are over that age might be ready to have that conversation. So they might not, they're limiting their food exposure, food modeling is really important for those younger kiddos who aren't ready to talk about that kind of stuff yet. And another really great tool is mindful eating. This can help reduce any impact that inevitable food marketing can have on kids. You can make talking about food a positive experience, reduce stress or any pressure around mealtimes, taking time to eat, about 15 to 30 minutes at a minimum for a mealtime around that time, savoring each bite, chewing it thoroughly, all mindful eating tools that can be really important to help develop healthy eating habits. You can have healthy options or any options that you want your kids to be eating readily available. And that's especially important for things like snacks and convenience foods that are packaged. So, sometimes the food labels, the food packages themselves are a source of food marketing. So if you decide that you found some products that you like, and maybe they're not as flashy or as colorful as the other products, they don't have the characters on the box, that's maybe an opportunity for you and the kids to put stickers on the box and make them look more appealing on your own. And lastly, understanding food labels is a really important tool. It's key to note that even though a nutrition facts label is an objective measure of what's in the food, it can also be a place where the company itself has some control and it could be considered marketing. The company gets to decide what's considered a portion size within reason, and that influences how all of the nutrients appear. So we'll go through some tips on reading food labels and using that to help you make some choices about packaged foods. Next slide. So here's just some rules of thumb when reading food labels. Since nutrition facts specifically show amounts for the portion size that the company has decided on, the portion size is the first place that you want to look at the top of the nutrition facts label. And then from there, you can determine if one portion size feels like it's realistically amount that your child will consume. They might be likely to eat more or less than that amount. So in that case, you may need to consider multiplying or dividing the amounts of each subsequent nutrient shown for that more realistic portion size. And then we have the percentage values, which are a good guideline, but they aren't very important to focus on, especially for kids, because they are derived from a 2,000 calorie diet. And that's not necessarily where your child is at as far as daily energy intake goes. So instead, focus more on the grams is a better strategy. So first, sugar is a really important one to keep your eye on. Good rule of thumb is to limit portions of sugar, especially added sugar in a packaged item, to less than 5 grams per serving. You can also consider choosing products with fewer ingredients listed and with ingredients of familiar sounding names. Well, this can be a really helpful tool, but it's not always one that needs to be followed hard and fast, because sometimes products list vitamins or other additives that might be beneficial that increase the number of ingredients listed, and they might not sound familiar. Additionally, some ingredients that are added for texture or that are for preservation's sake may sound unfamiliar, but they might just be totally safe to consume. So generally speaking, fewer ingredients close to their more whole form is great, but it doesn't necessarily mean that one product is nutritionally superior to another. Lastly, what nutrients that you want to consume are in the product. So we'll be focusing on having a higher amount of fiber, which is listed under the carbohydrate section. So you want to aim for greater than 3 grams per serving, and then protein, aiming for 5 or more grams per serving, and then a focus on vitamins and minerals, trying to get at least 10% of the daily value listed. And even if your child's getting a smaller portion than that, that's at least a good kind of benchmark to be looking for on the package. So next, I'll walk you through a few different food labels just to do some comparisons to illustrate these concepts. And we want to note that we are bringing some specific products to look at, but we're not endorsing or discounting any of these products as good or bad. It's just a tool to help us understand reading these food labels and the food marketing. So the first example here is a cereal that is marketed as high protein. So they're using this as a marketing tool to highlight a benefit of the product, more protein. But let's look a little deeper. So there are more than 12 ingredients, so that's quite a high number of ingredients. Also, there are 17 grams of sugar, which is more than 3 times the amount that we recommended of 5 grams per serving. And on the box, it says sweetened with honey as another added benefit that they're marketing. But then if you look at the ingredients list, you can see that there are actually other sources of sugar, including brown sugar, corn syrup, molasses. So there were several different sources of sugar that contributed to that 17 grams. And that amount, that 17 grams, is about as much sugar as you would get from 4 small chocolate chip cookies. So you do get the benefit of the 7 grams of protein, which is great, but you could also get that same amount from just 1 egg. So it's interesting to consider that a product that is marketed as it has many great health benefits may also have some downsides. Next. So we can compare that to a similar cereal that's not the higher protein alternative, just the plain oat cereal. So this has much less sugar, but it still has 3 grams of protein. And if that's served with milk, you can get up to the 7 grams of protein. So actually, it's pretty comparable as far as that added benefit that we were marketed on that previous box. And you also can see that there's at least 3 grams of fiber. So that's another great benefit of this cereal as well. Next slide. So here we have an example of kind of a granola bar that is definitely marketed towards kids. These types of products often say things like made with real fruit. So there's an additional marketing piece towards the parents. And the packaging often has bright colors to attract the younger audience. And then when you look at the nutrition label, you can see that there is a pretty high amount of sugar. So 12 grams of sugar, which is the equivalent of about 3 cookies in just 1 bar. And it's interesting to note that the nutrition facts of a granola bar across multiple brands tend to have some commonalities. They often tend to be high in sugar, and they sometimes are marketed as being high in fiber or being made from real fruit. So they have some benefits that they market towards you, but they oftentimes come at the price of having much higher sugar. Next slide. So here's an example of some crackers that could be an alternative snack option to the granola bar. A serving of these crackers plus half an apple could give you as much fiber, if not more, than one granola bar. And you can also see here that there are much fewer ingredients in the crackers. So pairing something like these crackers, which are packaged, with something fresh like an apple or another type of fruit is a great option. Other snacks you can consider are trail mix that are a mix of nuts and dried fruits, or string cheese and crackers, or hummus and veggie sticks. So these are all good examples of pairing something that's packaged with something that's not packaged. So this is also one of those boxes that's not marketed towards kids, more muted in color. It doesn't say anything that might be exciting to kids, but this might be one of those examples where you could add a couple of stickers to it and make it a little bit more interesting or exciting. Next slide. And this is an example of a yogurt drink that is definitely marketing towards kids with this packaging. The particular product here also markets with the tagline, "Nutrition Parents Love," because it's a yogurt, which is a good source of calcium. However, in order to get a full serving of calcium, you'd need to consume 3 full bottles of this product, and that would be 27 grams of sugar, which is really high. And one serving is only 3 ounces. So it's also important to consider, is that realistically what my kiddo will eat? If they're much younger, they might only have 1 bottle, but an older kid might have more. So they'll be having more than the 9 grams of sugar listed on this nutrition facts label. Next. This is an example of a low-fat plain yogurt where a serving size is 3/4 of a cup. So this is a little bit more realistic to what can be consumed in one sitting. And there's only 9 grams of sugar to that total portion. And then you're getting some healthy fats and a good amount of protein here as well. Another benefit of a plain yogurt or vanilla yogurt is that you can add whatever additional flavors you want. You could put some cinnamon, some nuts, fresh fruit, really make it personalized to your child's taste. And you can make it fun by approaching it kind of like a sundae and adding toppings that they like and getting playful with it. Next. And this is our last example. So this is a juice product, and you can see that one serving of this juice, which is 8 ounces, pretty small glass, has 22 grams of sugar. And many household glasses are more than 8 ounces, sometimes double. So having 1 glass will end up being even more than that 22 grams of sugar. For a long time, juice was marketed as a healthy breakfast alternative, but this option would give, in one serving, 5.5 sugar cubes worth of sugar. An alternative could be a fresh piece of fruit. For example, one small orange has only 9 grams of sugar and 2 to 3 grams of fiber. So fresh fruit has the benefit of being much lower in sugar and offering a great amount of fiber, where juice doesn't have any fiber at all. And now we'll go into the next couple of pitfalls with Meaghan.
Thanks, Kelly. So next we'll go into pitfall number 2, the picky eater. So we know that all children need to learn to eat new foods. Some do it with ease, and some others do not. So you might see that amongst your own household, where one kid will learn to eat easy and be receptive to new foods, where your next child might be completely different, despite doing maybe things similar. So it usually happens in children. It's common age 2 to 6, when children are being exposed to a much larger number of new foods, and it might be thought to be adaptive in nature. Picky eating ensures that the child consumes foods that are safe and familiar during this time. And so what we see is children reject new foods, or they'll fear new foods. They may only accept like a small number of their favorite or safe foods during this time. And this leads to poor dietary variety. Clinically, we see low intake of meats, vegetables, sometimes fruit, leading to low intake of iron, zinc, dietary fiber and other micronutrients. And during picky eating, sometimes growth is preserved. We see picky eaters that are underweight, normal weight, overweight. And sometimes picky eating can be short-lived, it can be a quick stage, and sometimes it can be rather prolonged. We usually hear from parents that they're concerned about their child missing nutrition, they're concerned about their growth and development, going to bed hungry, that sort of thing, leading parents to be frustrated, feel guilty over what they're doing, worrisome, and some unpleasant meal times. And parents might try anything when they get to this point, even things that they thought they would never do or say to their children. So what can you, there we go, on to next stage. So what we sometimes see in clinic is, what happens to a picky eater. As a parent, we might apply pressure. You become so emotionally invested in your child's eating. You pressure your child to eat. We have found that most of the time, parental pressure is met with, child's emotion, resistance, and usually doesn't end well. And so pressure might look like just take one more bite, physically forcing or threatening a child. If you finish your broccoli, you may have dessert, that type of thing, rewarding, using desserts as a reward. And it's hard to not engage in the mealtime battle, but we usually see that this is really counterproductive to helping your child learn to add new foods into their repertoire or accept more foods. And it can also seem positive. Pressure can seem positive, like applying too much, positive emphasis on a child. They might feel pressure to perform later, and sometimes doesn't work. So what can you do at home as a parent when you have a picky eater? So we talk about the division of responsibility in feeding, and it's sort of the gold standard we use as dietitians. It was created and developed by Ellen Satter, who's a registered dietitian. She's rather well known. And what it says, the division of responsibility is parents are responsible for what? So what are you cooking? What are you getting at the store? What's your meal plan like? Where you're having the meals, is it at a table? Is there distractions? And the when of feeding. So making sure that meals and snacks are spread out, that your child isn't snacking right before they're going into the dinner table. We know that a child that's full or not hungry is less likely to accept new foods or be motivated to try new foods at the dinner table. And the second piece of this is children are responsible for how much and whether or not they might eat at that meal or snack. We know that a child's intake and appetite might be very variable to their stage of development, their growth, their activity level. So what they eat at one meal might be very different day to day, time of day, that type of thing. The other thing that you can do in your home is expose your child to new foods. So we found that it usually takes 15 to 20 times to expose your child to a new food for them to decide whether or not they like it. In keeping it positive, like we said earlier, pressure often times backfires. So keeping these exposures really fun, kind of lowering your expectations. So maybe your child doesn't eat carrots the first time that they're presented at the dinner table, but can you get them to interact with it in some way? Can you get them to touch it with their hands or smell it? What does it smell like? Talk about the color, really coming at exposure as like a journey, lowering your expectations and thinking about it just in a way that your child might use all their senses to get to know the food, learn about the food, so that they might feel more comfortable, more confident to one day take a bite of it and like it. And play is okay. So this picture is a picture of a little baby here, toddler with yogurt all over their face. So a lot of the times this is normal, this is okay. I know it's messy and hard to pick up, but it's one way that your child is just getting to know the food, to understand the food before they might actually ingest it. And just like adults, how we have our own preferences for food, knowing that some children might just not like a food, even with intense feeding therapy. They might just not like it, and that's okay. There's so many fruits and vegetables and other types of foods in our food environment that might be, you could try something else too. Another good thing to try is family meals. So this provides structure. There's been a lot of positive outcomes found in regards to family meals outside of just positive nutrition outcomes. It allows a time for you to role model healthy eating for your child, to show your child that you yourself are eating a healthy, balanced plate and enjoying it. Sometimes including 1 to 2 safe foods. So if your child's really only eating like rolls or chicken nuggets, it's okay to include those from time to time to get them to feel comfortable at the dinner table. Okay, there's something here that I like. Kind of takes the pressure off, and maybe they're more likely to try the newer foods that are on the dinner table. Serving fruit is also a good trick that we use sometimes. So when intake of vegetables at dinner is low, serving fruit is a good way to fill in the nutrient gaps. Oftentimes fruits can have similar nutrition to vegetables, and flavoring vegetables well, so that, maybe instead of just steaming the broccoli, you roast it with like a little bit of honey or some oil or butter to make it a little bit more flavorful for kiddos that might taste, vegetables very bitter. Family style is sometimes works for families too. So it's putting all of the different foods on the table and allowing children to serve themselves. Sometimes older children like this, they feel more in control. And the use of a no thank you plate. So it's a small plate on the side of their dinner plate, just for, again, going back to the previous slide, exposure, allowing your child to interact with the food without the pressure to actually ingest it. Prevention. So what can you do if you have little babies at home? Introduction of solids. So there's 4 to 6 months is when it's recommended to start solid foods, but it's really based off your baby's feeding and readiness cues. So does your baby hold his or her head up consistently for longer periods of time? Can they sit with support? So today's modern high chairs provide great support for babies. And do they show interest in food? So as a baby is starting to learn and become, more aware of their world, are they showing interest in foods? Are they opening their mouth when you're eating a meal? That's generally those 3 things tell us that, okay, maybe your baby is ready to start solids. And in that case, we would say, go ahead and start them. Delayed introduction of textured foods. By the time a child is 9 months, has been shown to lead to more picky eating later on in childhood. So if you think your baby's ready, talk to your pediatrician, maybe it's ready to start solid foods. And we see that during this time too, children are biologically driven towards sweet, savory foods, but preferences can be shaped during infancy. So it's a good time to expose your little ones to all different tastes and textures in fruits, vegetables, and grains and meats during this time. And then I just wanted to compare normal picky eating, which we have been talking about, to Rfid, which is characterized by an eating disorder. I included the DSM-5 criteria here. It's different than picky eating. It's an extreme picky eating, and the main cause is different than typical picky eating. And it is an eating disorder, but the thing that's different about a classical eating disorder in Rfid is that there's no distortion in body image. And we usually tend to see very limited food. Typically, kids might have some other type of GI disease, reflux, EOE. Sometimes we see a significant negative eating experience that kind of went on to develop into Rfid. So like a choking episode that might have caused a lot of anxiety. And we see that children will completely eliminate major food groups or drop foods and doesn't regain them easily. Child may have a lot of anxiety around new foods or avoidance of very specific textures, colors, smells, and they may have no appetite and very prolonged meal times. And in this case, if you feel like your child is into this category, I would recommend talking to your pediatrician about it because it does require professional help from a team of specialists that might include behavioral psychologist, occupational therapist, registered a dietitian, and speech and language pathologist. The third pitfall is the junk food lover. So kids that really are drawn to foods that are high in fat or sugar. We tend to see that complete omission or elimination of them does not work and can kind of backfire. Too many restrictions can backfire, and it may lead to your child sneaking food, overeating, or the feeling of shame. So what's the solution to that? Might seem kind of obvious, but making sure that you're including these foods in a very neutral way. So including fun foods as part of, some of their calories. So, 1 or 2 servings per day, in addition to all of the nutrient-dense foods that might be in your diet. Again, trying to be sort of neutral about it so your child doesn't feel shame or guilt about it, be matter of fact. So maybe you offer dessert from time to time, or you go out for a treat as a family. And again, you want your child to be as neutral as possible about these highly palatable foods. And dieting and restriction is a risk for later development of an eating disorder. So in conclusion, what we've talked about today is focusing on whole foods for the majority of your child's nutrition. We know that repeated exposure helps your child learn to like new foods. Trying to avoid pressure, maintaining a positive family meal, and trying to include high-fat, high-sugar foods from time to time to allow your child to eat them appropriately in moderation. Some references.
Thank you so much, all of you. So at this point, we are opening the chat box for questions. So if anyone has questions, please put them in, and I'll read them out for everybody. Our first question is, I have a picky eater who takes a long time to finish a meal. Do you recommend that he stays at the dinner table until he's eaten most of his food, or end mealtime when he's stopped eating but still has a lot on his plate? And whoever wants to answer can go ahead.
I'll take this one. It can be really helpful to set like the kitchen is open kind of schedule around mealtime. So I would recommend, if it's any longer than 30 minutes, to kind of limit that and say, whatever hasn't been finished after this amount of time is, thrown away, and we'll have the next meal at the next scheduled time. So having a nice schedule of meals and snacks that are about, a minimum of 2 to 3 hours apart is a good kind of rule of thumb. And then just setting that meal time, sitting at the table, kind of focusing on the meal when it's happening, and then scrapping whatever doesn't get eaten. And kids are really good and intuitive about their hunger level. So if they didn't have enough at that meal, then they'll probably eat more at the next meal or the next day. So initially, if you're starting this strategy off, it may feel uncomfortable to change by a large amount of time. Like if it's an hour, going by half might feel like a lot. So you could consider just doing 1 meal a day, much shorter, or going down by 10 or 15 minutes at a time, and then kind of seeing how that works for your kiddo. But definitely, as Meaghan mentioned, if it seems like there's some other issue like Rfid going on, then I would recommend contacting your pediatrician, because slow eating might mean that they're having some kind of fear of the food, or if they're having any like chewing or swallowing difficulty. Those are the kind of things you'd want to bring up with a doctor.
Okay. And I second everything that was said there, and the majority of what the child is going to eat is probably within the 30-minute period or so. So dragging it on too much longer, they're probably not going to all of a sudden have the majority of their nutrition. And then sometimes it can sort of go on so long that it starts to bleed into the timing of the next meal or snack. So yeah, kind of saying, hey, 5-minute warning, we're going to pack this up as leftovers for later. We're going to toss it out and have something else later. And, knowing they probably have the majority of what they're going to have, and that, you did your part, you offered the food, and they're sort of just, making their sort of decisions, and then maybe sort of seeing if, is there anything else going on too? Are they, is it the scheduling of meals? Is this sort of the one time that they have kind of undivided attention? Is this, are there distractions going on? Is it depend on the type of food? Seeing if there's anything else like that. And I know that Ellen Satter, you know, I know we already mentioned her, but the Ellen Satter Institute has a nice article on called The Child Who Takes Too Long to Eat that kind of gives, you know, specific phrasing of how you can maybe, you know, word some of this when you're discussing it at the dinner table.
Okay, that's helpful. Our next question is, how do you put together a healthy snack for children, and what are some ideas?
I can take this one. So I generally say, you know, at a meal, you're sort of piecing together maybe 3 or 4 different food groups. For snack, it's a good time to think about, you know, not just doing one food group. So a lot of times we'll put, you know, I see parents do like goldfish or an apple or Cheez-Its. That's just one food group. So can we pair, you know, maybe that's a carbohydrate. Can we pair that with a protein? Can we pair that with a fat? So a good thing would be, like Kelly was saying, those crackers and peanut butter, or those crackers and cheese. So you have your carbohydrate, but then you're also adding some protein and fat to it. Kids love snacks, so I love to add nutrition to snacks and make, you know, kids are fascinated with snacks. So I think it's a good time to sort of sneak in a little bit of extra nutrition.
Okay, that's great. All right, another question is, where could a parent or a family member learn how to read a food label?
I wonder if there's, I don't know if you guys have a specific website recommendation. I'm sure the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has something, but I can look.
Does MyPlate have anything?
Right. So yeah, it looks like there's one on, so I guess it's eatright.org is kind of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which, you know, a lot of dietitians are sort of a part of that, that organization. So that website has things on, you know, get the facts on food labels, the basics of the nutrition facts label. It's, you know, they also have other ideas and recipes and things on their website. And then I wonder, yeah, I bet Choose MyPlate also does.
The FDA, yeah, the FDA's website has the nutrition facts labels and the MyPlate, kind of using them together, and tools on how to read and what you're looking for on their website. So fda.gov/new nutrition facts label. But if you just put it in Google, I think it will send you to the right place.
Yeah, and they are slight, not to make food labels more confusing, but they did make a slight update to the nutrition facts labels. So you might notice in the store very slight differences from one product to another, because some manufacturers decided to just switch over early to the new look, and other ones were sort of dragging their feet a little bit. So you might see just slight differences, you know, still all the same overall concept, but one might say added sugars, one might have a slightly different font size. So there's some slight changes coming.
Okay. Right. Just checking again for questions. I don't see anything else. Amy, did you see any other questions?
No, I have not. I think that was it.
Okay. All right. So if there are no more questions, I think we can wrap up a few minutes early. And as always, our 3 speakers are fantastic, and this is a very helpful topic. So I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. And as I had mentioned earlier, if you are interested in viewing the recording of today's session, it'll be made available on the Blum Center website at massgeneral.org/Blum-Center. Thank you so much, everyone, for a wonderful presentation, and thank you for joining us today. Hopefully you found today's session helpful. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon.